I think it's a side effect of constantly being superior to the people closest to you. I guess it makes them feel especially smart or like a secret agent from a movie. Either way, they're special, or at least that's what they think. Better than you, or me, or any other decent person who wakes up every morning thinking he's safe among friends, family, and people who love him. Of course, all this is complete nonsense. Lying to people who trust you is not that difficult, at least until they catch you doing it. Honey, great news. My wife Tracy exclaimed, putting her keys and purse on a small table near the front door. I smiled at her, but somehow sluggishly. She hadn't noticed it for weeks. What is it, dear? We've been invited to a corporate cruise next weekend, she said. It was a lie, and I knew it for several reasons. Firstly, her eyes were twitching and her smile was a little strained. After 10 years of marriage, I knew when she was two-faced, and these were her two main signs. Secondly, I've read every single text message between her and Austin Butcher, the man she's been having an affair with for the last 5 months. Wow, that's great, I said, fake sincerity literally oozing out of my vocal cords. How could she not have guessed? What's the reason? Where are we going? Tracy went into the kitchen, still talking to me over my back. Oh, it's just for meeting our annual sales targets, and I think we'll go to a private resort for the weekend. It should be a lot of fun. Don't forget to bring your swimming trunks. As I listened to Tracy fiddling with our coffee maker, I wondered if there was any point in the 2 more lies she just told me. You see, I knew for a fact that our destination was Butcher's private island, located a few miles from the Keys, and that the reason was chosen so that she could spend time with him. Text messages, remember? When Tracy showed up with her usual cappuccino from Keurig after work, I wondered, not for the first time, if I should just leave it all behind and go somewhere far away. It would certainly be a sensible thing to do, at least, much more sensible than boarding the private yacht of a millionaire who was going to continue this deception. However, I had a couple of advantages over Butcher and my wife. First, I knew everything about their plans, but perhaps more importantly, they were both not as smart as they thought. Tracy was looking at me with a malicious grin. That kind of smile made me think that her inner monologue sounded something like this. I can't wait to ruin this man's life, to paraphrase, of course. I just returned her grin, tit for tat, and politely asked what we had for dinner. I think it bothered her a little. Austin Butcher was no one special. Not really, anyway. His dad created a fairly large real estate empire back in the 80s, and then he had a stroke at Piggly Wiggly, an American supermarket chain, and he left everything to his son. Austin spent the next 10 years destroying it, mostly because of his own incompetence. Nevertheless, he had a lot of money, which eventually led him to my wife. My wife, Tracy, worked as a broker in a gallery selling art and antiques. The kind of things that people with too much money bought, mostly because it was the only kind of long-term investment that could politely show someone how rich you were, ever since lighting cigars with $100 bills went out of fashion in the 1920s. Butcher had an office that needed furnishing, and Tracy had the commission she wanted. The rest, as they say, is history. To be honest, I think it all started innocently enough. I still remember Tracy walking through the door with a beaming smile, waving a commission receipt like she'd won the lottery. It's been a tough year for us. The COVID lockdown has caused our local economy to collapse, so Tracy's windfall was more than welcome. She practically jumped on my lap and hugged me with a fervor I hadn't felt in what seemed like many years. That's how depressed we all were at the time. Oh, darling, what is it? She exclaimed. We have a new rich client, and he spends money like water. If I had been paying more attention, I think I would have seen dollar signs in her eyes, the 20-20 ratio, and all that. In a way, it was sweet. She bought me presents, at least at first. She talked about Austin all the time, and it wasn't so cute anymore. Eventually, she stopped talking about him at all, and I no longer saw her waving another check as she walked through the door, but I knew the money was still coming in. Until that happened, I probably would have remained blissfully unaware of my upcoming date with Austin Butcher if my wife had been smarter. I have a theory about this, which I won't bore you with. But to sum it up in a nutshell, I think Butcher is a man with serious internal conflicts. It seems that one of his favorite fantasies was to humiliate others, seeking power and control. Sorry, I got distracted. Tracy is a fool. She opened a secret bank account and used our home address. I found the statement. There was a lot of money. More than we both usually earn in a year. I was a little stunned, so that night at dinner I asked her about it in a roundabout way. Hey baby, I said, shifting the peas on my plate. What happened to those big commission checks? I noticed that you haven't received them for a long time." Tracy, to her credit, only splashed her red wine out of the corner of her mouth, rather than giggling with her mouth full. Uh, she hesitated for a moment, the little hamster driving the wheel in her brain clearly working overtime. "I think he's moved." I must admit, I almost grinned. She was acting like a teenager caught in something indecent. "Oh, don't worry about him. He's moved away. We don't ride the bus together anymore." "You mean that big real estate dealer, right? What was his name again?" I pretended I didn't know who he was to allay her fears that I might figure her out. "Uh, I think it's something like Austin," she said. Now I'm flippantly talking about all this after the fact, but then this attempt by Tracy to dismiss me pierced me like a punch in the stomach. At that moment, I was sure that my marriage was over. Still, I didn't give up hope. Maybe she was just passionate about money? I know it seems pathetic to me now, but my brain plays all sorts of strange tricks when it tries to rationalize my entire life and my 10-year marriage, which is going downhill. It wasn't until later that night, when I unlocked Tracy's phone, she still hadn't bothered to change the code, and read her correspondence, that I realized how bad the situation was. I admit I didn't cry, but it took me about 2 weeks before my stomach stopped rebelling. Anxiety does strange things to people if it's not dealt with, and the best way for me to deal with it was to start working on a plan. Equals dash equals dash equals dash equals dash equals dash equals dash equals. Their plan, like themselves, was rather primitive. They were going to drug me at dinner, then with the help of one of the yacht's crew members, who was actually a bodyguard, carry me to a separate cabin and hold me there. They were going to take pictures of me in a humiliating position to use it against me. I want to point out that no matter how smart this plan may seem to idiots, if you don't want to go to jail, you shouldn't try to put drugs in people's drinks. And you certainly shouldn't discuss such plans in texts, especially those that your husband copied onto a cloned phone stored by his lawyer. Now, it's possible that I actually had a bottle of sleeping pills with me, ordered with my wife credit card, and perhaps it was even in my travel bag right now. But that was just one of my many plans. There was a whole bunch of everything, from laxatives to regular pills. The bottom line is that I had a plan. All I had to do was figure out how to implement it. Equals dash equals dash equals dash equals dash equals dash equals dash equals. We went yachting. Despite everything, the sea wind was invigorating. The crew was exactly as I expected: a captain, an assistant, a cook, and a man who was supposed to keep order. The other guests were a couple of Tracy's office staff, her boss, Thurgood, and his wife, Eliza. At least Eliza had the sense to know that something was wrong. Butcher was defiant with Tracy. I didn't stop them. I didn't care. Instead, I pretended to flirt with one of Tracy's employees, a girl named Claire. Her husband understood everything and did not object. They were all involved in this. I complimented Claire on choosing a swimsuit. I poured her drinks, ignoring Tracy. The atmosphere on the yacht was getting more tense, and that was good. We were supposed to have a joint dinner that evening, after which they were going to put their plan into practice. But I had my own ideas. Then I noticed something in the distance. "Hey, isn't that a whale?" I said and pointed to the port side. Everyone came over to look. When we got closer, it really turned out to be a dead whale. The women got upset. Butcher told them to turn around. But I noticed something interesting that I'll come back to later. The time to act was approaching. I excused myself, saying I had to go, and went into the kitchen to chat with the cook. The conversation was friendly, and I asked to be shown where the cleaning products are stored. She showed me the closet. I found what I needed there, grinned, and came back. I made a couple of preparations, returned to the deck, and continued to maintain the appearance of normal behavior. Everything was going according to plan. Equals dash equals dash equals dash equals dash equals dash equals dash equals. We were all sitting at the big table in the living room when Butcher got up. "I would like to make a toast." His voice trembled, either from excitement or nervousness, or maybe both. This guy was dangerous, and I didn't feel like I was safe. I obediently raised my glass along with everyone else. To good friends and new beginnings. We exchanged glances. They drank. Mom raised me not to be a fool, so I put my glass down untouched. A nervous look flickered between my wife and her companion. "Honey, you have to drink," she whispered to me. "I don't like champagne," I said. Once again, I saw that something fishy was going on. The empty eyes were excellent evidence. But, it's rude," she insisted. "It doesn't matter. I gave up alcohol. You know, it's unhealthy." Another look. this time between the steward and butcher. We'll find you something non-alcoholic. I'm sorry, sir. I'd rather have a Coke. Of course, sir. I nodded graciously and then cut my steak. It looked decent, well marinated, medium fried, and the only dish I hadn't spoiled. The conversation was sparse and banal. My wife was uncharacteristically silent. I wondered if she was feeling remorse. Probably not. Here, sir, the steward said, putting what looked like a glass of Coke on the table. I smiled and reached for it with a little more enthusiasm than I had intended, and instead of grabbing it, it flew across the table. Oops. Damn it. You can't do anything right, Tracy exclaimed. I'm sorry. I whined like a moody teenager and snorted dramatically. It's all right. We'll just take that away and give you another one, Butcher said. Beads of sweat appeared on his forehead. Everyone else looked extremely uncomfortable. They're going to get a lot worse soon. You see, liquid magnesium citrate is one of the fastest acting and most powerful laxatives you can purchase. It is an osmotic laxative, meaning it works by drawing water into the small intestine. Earlier, when I went to the head room, I made a little trip to the galley and watered everything abundantly except steaks. I like steaks. Poor Claire was the first to succumb. We all heard the characteristic gurgle coming from her intestines, and she politely left with a blush on her face. I thought for a moment that blushing redheads are very cute. Then everything went like clockwork, or rather, like knocking down a row of dominoes. Eliza was next, then Thurgood, then Tracy, Claire's husband, and finally Butcher himself. This one was smart enough to say weakly, "Something's wrong," when he returned to the table. After 4 minutes, he left again. "Here, have a drink," I said, holding out the glasses of water that I had poured from the carafe. "You don't want to get dehydrated. You might get hurt," I said with mock seriousness. Tracy took the first glass from me, and then others started drinking. The steward returned from the kitchen to warn everyone that it looked like something spoiled had been served for dinner today. But he was greeted by the smell of Thurgood, who literally shit his pants while holding his stomach. Now, those of you who are smart have probably realized that the fact that I offered everyone water was not an act of goodwill. No, every glass was liberally packed with a strong psychoactive substance. It is better known to most of you as a sedative. So, if you thought that a yacht full of scoundrels suffering from food poisoning was funny, just imagine it with the addition of a strange feeling of euphoria. I really wanted to stay and enjoy the spectacle, but to be honest, after a few minutes the stench became unbearable. Tracy, honey, are you okay?" I asked my wife. She was lying face down, clutching her stomach, and sweating from the pain. I don't know what's wrong with me." I helped her to her feet and led her out of the cabin, saying that fresh air could help her. It was cool outside, colder than one would think in winter in Florida, even despite the night breeze from the ocean. "Tracy, can I ask you something?" She looked up from the deck and looked at me. For a moment, the moonlight fell on her face, and I almost regretted what I was going to do. "Why did you do that, Tracy? Was it just for the money?" Her face, already pale, seemed to lose all color instantly. Her mouth opened like a goldfish's. What? I'm sorry," she gasped. "Austin. Tracy, why were you with Austin?" My voice sounded sadder than I really thought. It was interesting. She began to lie. I interrupted her. "Tracy, I know everything. I know what you did. I know what you plan to do tonight. I just don't understand why. Do you really hate me that much?" I sighed and leaned back against the railing. Tracy was obviously struggling to contain herself. "I don't hate you. I swear it." "I don't know," she muttered. She was losing the battle. "You must hate me. I can't think of any other explanation for them trying to harm me, trying to poison me. Tracy, were you going to let these people hurt me?" Now I was getting angry. My hands were clenched into fists with rage. "What the hell, Tracy? What have I done to deserve this?" She was crying openly now. Due to the agonizing sobs, she finally lost control of herself. The stench was sickening. It was a moment of truth for me. Will I implement my impromptu plan or just call the Coast Guard? It wasn't too late for me to end it without violence. End it with a clear conscience. Unfortunately for Tracy, she ruined everything herself. It's simple. "Shut up. You did it. You did it, didn't you?" She screamed at me. It looks like she finally got it. You're terrible. Why couldn't you just leave it as it is?" The moonlight shone on Tracy again, and this time, instead of the sweet girl I married, I finally saw her for who she is. A piece of dirt. Do you know what they do with mud in the sea? They throw her overboard. Put me on the floor. Stop it. She screamed as I picked her up and threw her over the left side of the yacht. It wasn't that far away, but she hit with an impressive splash. There was silence for a moment, and then she surfaced from the water, and the screams resumed. You scoundrel! Get me out of here! Stop it! She screamed. I sighed. You see, as I mentioned briefly, it was winter in Florida. Many people probably don't know this, but I was a science teacher. I knew that sharks really like two things, even more than blood, sound, and ammonia. Well, Tracy made a lot of noises, especially when she was floundering in the water. The ammonia was obtained from 2 large cans of ammonia, which I poured through an open window. Tracy was just starting another story about how insignificant I am when she let out an inhuman scream. My leg. Stop it, she bellowed. Yeah, just like catnip for sharks. Or maybe shark mint. I didn't think it would really work, and to be honest, I would have been happy to see her drown, but the science teacher in me was more than happy. In the end, it's always nice to see an experiment bearing fruit. I leaned over the railing and shouted back at her. We're getting a divorce. She didn't have anything to say to that. I think she was in shock. I didn't stay long to see what had happened. I still had a lot of things to do. When I returned to the wardroom, I saw that most of the crew and guests were lying on the floor in a swoon. Big Williams looked like he had overdosed. He drank the rest of the iced water from the carafe that I left on the table. Butcher seemed to succumb to the sleeping pills I put in his drink. His fingertips were blue, and his breathing was shallow. I found his room, rummaged through his luggage, replaced a couple of bottles in Tracy's luggage, and then, with a theatrical sigh, did the last thing I wanted to do tonight. I locked the door of my cabin, drank a large dose of laxatives, and took a dose of sedatives. It's going to be a long night. Equals dash equals dash equals dash equals dash equals dash equals dash equals. The subsequent events went much better than I expected. The bandit Williams, as I expected, has died. His asshole boss survived, but it helped me a lot when the cops looked through my missing wife's phone and found out about the plan to drug me that night. The fact that she had several powerful sleeping pills and other illegal drugs in her luggage, as well as many other things in her car and office, became a real smoking gun. The real culprit, of course, turned out to be Butcher. There were messages between him and Williams in which they discussed the plan and even bought drugs for evening entertainment with me. The case was widely publicized, and it was a huge scandal, so huge that even Butcher's millions couldn't buy it off. As a result, he went to prison on a number of charges of possession of prohibited substances, assault, and conspiracy. I shook every last penny out of him in a civil court. At first, no one could find Tracy. There was speculation in the press that she had fled the country. I was questioned by the police. They bullied and bluffed, but in the end, they had to give in because they had nothing. I haven't even filed for divorce. I did not use the services of a private investigator. I did not need it. These 2 idiots provided me with all the necessary evidence, and I never told my lawyer why he was holding the phone for me. I'm sure he suspected something, but suspicion wasn't enough for him to go to the police, especially after I discussed with him my plans for the Butcher estate litigation. Like my ex-wife, his eyes lit up at the prospect of taking over a portion of other people's millions. As a result, a week later, a dismembered torso washed up on the North Beach. Obviously, it was the victim of a shark attack. She was identified by medical evidence. The police visits started again, but by this time, I think everyone had already forgotten about it. The police explained that she fell overboard and was eaten by sharks. In the end, it was more or less true. Equals dash equals dash equals dash equals dash equals. 2 years later, when I was vacationing at the all-inclusive resort in Playa del Carmen, I met my future wife, Rebecca. Like me, she was a teacher, and like me, her ex cheated on her. Like all redheads, she seemed very cute to me when she blushed. I remember how on the second evening, she came to my room and gasped at how well it was furnished. Rick, I thought you were a school teacher. How can you afford all this? What is it? She asked me. I checked her eyes for greed and didn't see the slightest hint. She took the drink I made for her and leaned back on the couch. Well, my dear, I said with a smile, you've seen my lawyer. He's a real professional.